In this lesson, we're going to look at multiplying out double brackets. This is situations like these questions down at the bottom here where we have one bracket followed directly by another bracket. When we see the two brackets next to each other, for instance this followed by this, then each term in the first bracket must be multiplied by each term in the second bracket. These two brackets here are multiplying each other, so everything in this bracket must multiply everything in this bracket. So let's take a look at the first example here. We have two brackets, x plus 3 in the first bracket and x minus 6 in the second bracket. So first thing we need to do is take this x, our first term, and multiply both the x and the negative 6. We'll then take our 3 in the first bracket and multiply the x and the negative 6. Best way to do that is continue to put the lines in that we've used previously. So x multiplied by x first, that gives me x squared. And then the x will have to multiply the other thing in the second bracket, which is negative 6. So positive x times negative 6 is negative 6x. Moving on from there, we've dealt with the x here. So now we have to deal with this positive 3 in the first bracket. So the positive 3 is now going to multiply this x. So positive 3 times positive x is positive 3x. And then positive 3 multiplied by negative 6 is negative 18. So we have 4 multiplications there. If I then start to collect like terms, again I'm going to be looking for my x squared terms, my x terms, so this term here, negative 6x and positive 3x, and lastly my constant terms, my plain numbers. So these can be grouped together. I'm going to start with my x squared term, so there's one x squared term there in the red, so that's x squared, and then my x terms, I've got negative 6 plus 3. So negative 6x plus 3x should give me negative 3x, if I use my number line. And then my only constant term is minus 18, so that will simply drop down. And that's the double bracket multiplied out. We'll now have a look at section B here, where we're going to basically do the same thing. We're going to start off with our first term in our first bracket, this 2x, and it's going to have to multiply this 3x. So positive 2x times positive 3x is positive 6x squared. Remember, x times x is going to give me x squared. We're then going to have our 2x. Once it's multiplied the 3x, it has to go and multiply the positive 1. So positive 2x times positive 1 is positive 2x. Now that the 2x has multiplied both things in the second bracket, we can move on to the positive 7 in the first bracket. So positive 7 times 3x is positive 21x. And positive 7 times positive 1 is positive 7. So again, 4 multiplications there to get us to our next line. After that, again, we're at the stage where we need to start to collect like terms. So I'm going to start with my x squared terms. I only have one x squared term there. Then my x terms, so positive 2x and positive 21x. And lastly, I'm going to look at my constant term at the end here. So grouping those together, I've got my x squared terms, so that's positive 6x squared. I've got my x terms, so positive 2x plus 21x gives me positive 23x's. And then my constant term on its own, positive 7, will just drop down. And that's that question done. In example C, it doesn't initially look like a double bracket, but what I have up here is I have a squared sign, which means this whole bracket is being squared. In other words, this whole bracket is being multiplied by itself. So the first thing I would do in a question like that is I would rewrite that. So x minus 7, the whole bracket is being multiplied by itself, so multiplied by another x minus 7. And if it's written out like that, it's just a little bit easier to kind of put your lines in and make sure you don't make any common mistakes. Common mistake here is people just square both things in the bracket and end up with x squared plus 49, which is incorrect. So, going through these one at a time, my x times my x, positive x times positive x is positive x squared. Positive x times negative 7, negative 7x. We have negative 7 then multiplied by positive x, so negative 7x, and negative 7 multiplied by negative 7, which gives me positive 49. Again, then we're going to go through and we're going to collect our like terms. So I have one x squared term, I have 2x terms, and again you'll notice I'm highlighting the sign in front of them as that's part of the term. The other x term here is our negative 7x here. And lastly, we have our constant term, positive 49 there. All I've got to then do is bring them together. So I have 1x squared And then looking at my x terms, negative 7x, take away another 7x is minus 14x or negative 14x. And then lastly my constant term, 1 on its own, which is positive 49. And again, that's that question done. In example D, I've put example D in here because it looks slightly different to others, and that can quite often throw people. We've got in all of the other examples, in each bracket, an x term followed by a constant term, x term followed by a constant term. In other words, the x term comes first. In example D, we have our constant term followed by our x term. Now, as I said, this can often throw people and they think you have to do something completely different, but we're not going to do anything different here. We're just going to follow the same process. We're going to start with the first term in the first bracket, and it's going to go across and multiply both things. So the positive 3 times positive x is positive 3x. Then we have our positive 3 times negative 4, which is negative 12. Then once we've multiplied both things in the second bracket by the 3, that's the 3 done its job, we now move on to the negative 2x in the first bracket. So this negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared, and negative 2x times negative 4 is positive 8x. Once we've done that first step again, we're going to look at starting to collect together like terms. So start off looking for some x squared terms. So I've got 1x squared term there, which is negative 2x squared. I'll then start to look for x terms. I've got positive 3x and positive 8x. And lastly, my constant term hidden in the middle here of negative 12. Going through that one at a time, then starting off with my x squared term, I'm going to have negative 2x squared. Looking at my x terms then, I've got positive 3x plus another 8x, which is positive 11x. And lastly, I've got a constant term there on its own, which is just negative 12. And that's that question finished. We're now going to look at example E. Now, example E might strike you as being different straight away. We've got in the first bracket 2 terms, 4x plus 2. But in the second bracket, we don't just have 2 terms this time. We've got 3 terms, our x squared, our x term, and our constant term. So we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to start off with the first term in the first bracket, that 4x. It's going to have to multiply all 3 things in the second bracket. So I'm going to have to do 4x times x squared. So positive 4x times positive x squared is positive 4x cubed. I'm then going to have to multiply 4x here by negative x. So that's positive 4x times negative x. That'll make it negative 4x squared. And then positive 4x multiplied by positive 3, which is positive 12x. So I end up with 3 terms from that first part of the question. Now that I've multiplied everything in the second bracket by the 4x, I move on to this positive 2. So positive 2 times x squared is positive 2x squared. Positive 2 times negative x is negative 2x. And positive 2 times positive 3 is positive 6. Now I need to get to the stage where I can start to look through my like terms. So I've got an x cubed term here, there's only one of those. I have x squared terms, so negative 4x squared and positive 2x squared here. We'll then look at our x terms, so positive 12x and negative 2x, and lastly our constant term, which is on its own here at the end, positive 6. So go through them in turn and collect them together. So we'll start off with our x cubes, as I said, only one of them. So I'm going to write that down, that's positive 4x cubed. I'm then going to look at my x squared terms. Now I've got negative 4x squared plus another 2x squared. That's going to take me to negative 2x squared. My x terms, I'm starting with positive 12x. I'm subtracting 2x from that, so I'm left with positive 10x. And lastly, my constant term, there's only one of those, and it's positive 6. And that's that question finished. We'll now go on to look at example F. Now example F is fairly tricky, and there's a few things you need to be aware of. Let's start off, and we'll just go through it one step at a time. First of all, in example F, we have a number multiplying out a single bracket. So that can be done straight away, and that's fairly straightforward. We've got 3 times x is 3x, and positive 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Over here is where it becomes a bit more tricky, because we have a double bracket, so this bracket has to multiply this bracket, but in front of it, there's this negative sign here. Now that negative sign actually has to multiply out what's over here. So we've got to remind ourselves, when we see a negative directly in front of a bracket, there's a wee hidden 1 in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that little 1 as it is just now. So I'm going to put in the negative and 1, and I'm going to close off a big square bracket here. And in that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore everything else and simply multiply out these two brackets. So I'm going to start with x times x, giving me x squared. I'm then going to have x times negative 2, so negative 2x, negative 3 times x, negative 3x, and negative 3 times negative 2, which is positive 6. What I then need to do is one of two things. I can either simplify what's in the red set of brackets there, or I can multiply everything in the red bracket by that negative 1. It's really up to you. We'll just go through it a step at a time. So I'm going to leave the 3x minus 3 as it is for the moment, and I'm going to just leave that negative 1 and the big red brackets. But I'm going to simplify the contents of that bracket there. So x squared is my only x squared term. My x terms are negative 2x, take away a further 3x, that's negative 5x, and I only have one constant term. What I can then do before I go any further, and again, these two at the front are going to get bored, but they're not going to be doing anything for a wee while, so I'm going to leave them as they are, and then I'm going to multiply out this red bracket here by the negative 1 in front of it. Now, negative 1 will multiply the x squared, so it becomes negative 1x squared, or negative x squared. Negative 1 times negative 5x is positive 5x, and negative 1 times positive 6 becomes negative 6. What I can then do is go through and start to collect together like terms. So I've got there my x squared term, I've got my x terms, positive 3x and positive 5x, and I've got my constant terms here, negative 3 and negative 6. So gathering them together, starting with the x squared terms. So if we look at what I've highlighted there, the x squared terms, negative x squared. Okay, it's important to include the sign directly in front, remember. My x terms, I have positive 3x plus 5x, which is positive 8x. And my constant terms, I'm starting with negative 3 and I'm subtracting another 6, so negative 9. And that's that done. We'll now look at the last example where we're asked to find an expression for the area of the rectangle. Now the important word there is find an expression for the area of the rectangle. Normally when you've been asked to find the area of a rectangle, you're going to get a number. For instance, the area of the rectangle is 9 square centimetres. However, in this case, we're not going to get a number because we don't have numbers here and here. We've got algebraic expression there and an algebraic expression there. So it asks you to write down the expression for the area of the rectangle with brackets and without brackets. So let's look at how we would do that. So starting with part A, what do we know about the area of a rectangle? Well, we should know at this stage that the area of a rectangle is its length multiplied by its breadth. Now, if you look at the length and breadth on this rectangle, the length is x plus 1, and I want to multiply it by the breadth, and the breadth is x minus 2. So how do I multiply these two brackets together? Well, that's just what we've been doing over the last wee while, so it's x minus 2 in the second bracket. Now I know these two brackets are multiplying each other together. So the first question, part A, says, write down an expression for the area of the rectangle with brackets. So that's this here. This is an expression for the area of this rectangle, and it still has the brackets there. Part B, it's dead simple. It's just asking you for that without brackets. So take the bracketed version, x plus 1, x minus 2, and just do what we've been doing. We want to multiply that out or get rid of the brackets. So x times x squared, x times negative 2, negative 2x, positive 1 times positive x is positive 1x, and positive 1 times negative 2, negative 2. And then quickly again, look for your like terms and collect them together. I've got 1x squared term. My x terms are negative 2x plus 1x, so that's negative 1x I'm going to end up with. And lastly, minus 2. Now, at the end of each of these, you could write square units. There are no units involved in this, so we can just say square units. If these lengths, at the end of those brackets, they said centimetres, so for instance, up here, x minus 2 centimetres, then down here you'd be writing square centimetres. Now, this sort of question we'll see more and more as we go through the course, as we try to apply what is some quite abstract algebra, like these questions here, to real life situations where we can use our algebra to solve problems.